Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sports Psych Show. Thanks so much for joining me. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Chris Shambrook. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, very well indeed, Dan. Delighted to be here for the third time and in special circumstances.
Well, those special circumstances being episode number 300, and you've been willing to come on and ask me some questions. Well, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have a chat here and share some ideas. But you have very kindly given me some time to come on and ask me some questions, which I also did way back in episode 100, where we had a mutual friend, Dr. Scott Goldman, came on and asked me some questions. Didn't do it for episode 200, but doing it for episode 300. And I'm super honoured to have you here. How's life? How are you?
Good. Life is good. I am very much kind of, post-sports psych as a significant part of the day job these days, having done 22 years with the British rowing team and some other stuff around that and a little bit and pieces after that. Having done corporate work alongside that pretty much all the way through, I'm now very much in that space all the time, which gives a variety of challenge and opportunity, but fundamentally it's still performance psychology and a lot of the stuff that I learned and used in the Olympic environment, but applied to a world where they're on the field of play every day rather than perhaps on the training ground much more.
Well, you know this show well because my next question was going to be, my next request was going to be asking you to introduce yourself, which you've kind of done there, but you've been a sports psychologist, or you were a sports psychologist for many years, and you were one of my inspirations. I saw you speak back in, I'm going to say the late 90s. It was at a golf conference, and it was an awesome talk, mate. It really was, and it was one of the talks that inspired me to pursue sports psychology further. So you're to blame, or at least in part to blame.
And interestingly, that talk was about confidence, and
it was.
and that's an ongoing theme, and we'll probably talk about it today as well. But it's such a fundamental area in every single thing that we do, not just how we serve people, but also, what this kind of offering that you've put together provides practitioners as well. The confidence to actually have something that is really sellable, buyable, valuable, impactful, all of those things. But the confidence theme, if it kicked off with that one, it's always been a favourite of mine. So I'm delighted. I remember some of those things in that session way ago. But confidence is just such a great area. And delighted that it got you to that point as well and helped you move from your aspiring golf career into an exceptional sports psych career.
Now, I know today you're supposed to be asking the questions, but you've got me curious already, because my mind is churning away, and I'm thinking about how you worked for years with some of the best rowers in the world, the British rowing teams, the most successful Olympic teams in rowing, and possibly some of the most successful Olympic teams of all time. You will have worked with them on confidence. You've always worked in a corporate environment, but really that's all you do now. Do you feel that confidence is a massive deal for those in the workplace?
I think it is generally a massive deal for everybody.
Yes.
Primarily because it's not something we typically get taught how to build. We're typically taught to not talk about it, because if we've got too much of it, we're arrogant, and if we haven't got enough of it, it will be something that people might catch that lack of confidence off us. But it's probably the most essential, consistent underpinning from both a readiness to go and a motivation perspective. So, but actually, the relationship with competence and sense of self, and there's so much that if we're putting ourselves on the line every day to have a robust confidence, a robust sense of relationship with ourselves, it's just massive. And whatever people's track record, that doesn't protect people from the need to keep working on belief in self.
See, I think this is really interesting, because let me just say firstly, I would align myself with you. But again, you're here today to ask me some questions, a reflection back on the previous 299 episodes. And I do remember that in some of those episodes with some really good sports psychs on talking about their view of confidence. Confidence kind of gets a bit of a bad rap these days in
Mhm.
sports psychology. There's a lot of sports psychs out there who will say, well, it's not that tangible. You can't see it. I think sports psychology isn't as convinced about this idea of confidence as it once was. And
Mhm.
many sports sites I know have said, well, yeah, you can't see it, so we don't really care. I suppose it's taking a bit of an acceptance, commitment, therapeutic framework there more than anything. But yeah, there's a lot of psychs who go, confidence, I'm not too sure.
And I guess from a very practical perspective, I've always equated it with, if from a rowing perspective, endurance capability is
Mm.
probably one of the most important physiological factors. You don't wait to lose endurance capability before you start training to become as aerobically conditioned as possible. I think confidence is up there across all sports with, a comparison with the most important technical physical variable, that you
Mm.
don't wait to lose it in order to do stuff that kind of goes, is my belief still as strong as it can be? Is my confidence in good shape? Which means that everything that I've been investing, I can conclude that if I think by being myself today, is it enough? If I'm 100% myself and I'm 100% using everything that I've put in place, will it be enough today? And I think if you can answer that predominantly yes, that's an underpinning from a confidence perspective. And the other thing that I think is that people spend so much time training in order to execute under pressure. You are training to demonstrate that you do what you say you're going to do. You turn intention into reality. And that for me is the other part of confidence, that if you know that you are going to do what you say you're going to do, for me that is just a very tangible thing, that I've got a track record of doing what I say I'm going to do, and I've got a track record of capability that I've built, that means that I can know by being myself it's going to be enough to do what I need to do. I might not win, but I'm confident I can play. And so that's why for me it is incredibly tangible and incredibly important to keep checking in on the fact that I've been investing all this thing. I need a relatively simple operating system to convince myself that, going out there today, it's gonna be a good day.
It's interesting because, again, today it's about some reflection on some of the past episodes, but you've immediately made me think of one episode in particular. And I'm not just saying this because you're here speaking with me, but something you said there, I'm going to draw on our first episode together, and it's actually going back to episode number 2, way back. You were my second
Yeah,
guest, and you said something that's always stuck with me that I've always liked. And that's that if I'm not feeling 10 out of 10 today and I'm feeling, let's say, 7 out of 10,
yeah,
I might be
yeah,
butchering this, so please come back at me if I'm getting this wrong. If I'm feeling 7 out of 10, can I hit 7 out of 7?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Which kind of aligns neatly with what you've said about, looking for evidence for confidence and then creating a narrative around, okay, I've done this, this, and this, and this. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. This is evidence that suggests I'm ready. So I'm going to be my own personal best. And if my own personal best is a mark out of 7, let's get to 7 out of 7.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The 100% mentality, and that for me is a critical bit of the confidence. Because yes, you want to train and develop so that on the days that matter most, you feel 10 out of 10 ready, but you still know that you can get 10 out of 10. But if you're not quite there, your ability to kind of go, I'm an 8 today. How good am I when I'm 8 out of 10? I'm this, I'm that, and you've got some real clarity over how good you still are in order to go and get everything out of that 8. And that maybe gives you an opportunity to step into a 9 during the course of what you're doing. But you're going from a position of strength and belief in self with a desire to upgrade, or an opportunity to upgrade through actually feel it, getting on a bit of a roll, getting some, getting something that just feels right and falls into place in the heat of battle. I love all of that stuff, but that comes back to, I do what I say I'm going to do, and I know by being myself it will be enough to do X, Y, and Z, and achieve this level of success today.
Well, we spoke about that in episode 2, as I said, and that was September 2018.
Wow.
And we are here. We are September 2024.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that really
Epi-
6 years ago? So, but I want to jump in and kind of go, from a confidence perspective, and if you think about your confidence journey as a practitioner in those 299 episodes in those 6 years, what have you noticed about your belief that by being yourself it will be enough through what you've learned through the different guests, etc.? What's been the impact for your belief in practitioner effectiveness?
yeah, it's a great question. And I definitely can reflect back over the last 6 years, and my knowledge base has broadened and deepened. I, as a sports psychologist, going from playing professional golf, being a PGA golf coach, and as I was a PGA golf coach, going through my degree, my master's degree, doing various supervisions, I was somebody who, if I was to be 100% honest, was having come from a playing and coaching background, I was probably at that time a little bit too dismissive of research
Mm-hmm.
and findings that were uncovered out, away from the stadium, away from the lights. I was very into self-help at that time, various sort of pop psychology books, and I probably at that
Yeah.
time felt I knew far more than I actually did. And then as I started to
Yeah.
get more experienced as a practitioner psychologist, I started to realize that there were gaps in my knowledge base. And that was largely because of my, either you could call it arrogance or ignorance earlier in my career. And so I realized, wow, I really need to, I don't want to necessarily go back to education, but I want to find a platform that's really going to suit me and really going to motivate me to learn from really good people who are doing research, who are at the
Mm-hmm.
coalface, who are competing, who are coaching. So learn from good people, but make sure that the main body of knowledge that I'm learning in this process is from from research, because I've got a gap there. So that's why I started the podcast, and it's been a little bit of a selfish act in that respect. And I can definitely reflect back and go, wow, my knowledge has broadened, it's deepened. I feel it's broadened, I feel it's deepened. I feel more confident that I'm evidence informed or evidence grounded or evidence based, depending on which one you prefer. And I do believe there are subtle differences between each one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that makes me feel a sense of competence and a sense of confidence as well. Competence and confidence.
And in terms of the requirement of the practitioner to stand in front of experienced people who have done what they're doing to a very high level and communicate with a level of belief that demonstrates you have something to
Mm.
offer. That again, that's kind of why I'm asking the question from a practitioner perspective, because you're in the spotlight and someone's kind of going, okay, show me what you've got then. And I think the confidence is something that has to come through in the way in which the practitioner provides a value proposition.
I agree, and I think in shorthand, what I'm hearing you say is you've got to know your stuff.
But be able to convince someone else you know your stuff who might not know what you know and is looking for an impact.
So to throw something back at you there, if you're going to be your authentic self, which we believe is so important these days, if I'm going to be my authentic self and deliver the stuff that I believe that I know in as authentic a way as possible, I need to know that stuff.
Yep.
And so this is where I think there's an interesting link between confidence and competence. And I think they go hand in hand. And I think
Yep.
one builds on t'other. Confidence influence competence, and competence influences confidence. And I think it's the combination of the two. And I wonder if I personally, I reflect back on my early career, and this is the same for all of us, right? In our early career, where as long as we're doing the right things, as long as we're engaging in reflection in order to improve every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year, we need to be getting better. And when I reflect back on my early consultancy practice, I would say, yeah, you know what? I actually had, I was delivering with quite a bit of confidence. Was that a false sense of confidence? Well, when I reflect back, possibly so, because I didn't know enough at the time. But now I feel, and it's certainly, I certainly feel I can get more competent, but I feel a lot greater sense of competence, and that competence has driven my confidence. So both have met each other, and I feel fairly confident, or more confident, delivering now. And a part of that is this
Yeah.
process of this podcast.
Yeah, and so whenever I'm talking to people about confidence and they say, "Oh, I need confidence," I will instantly say, "Confidence in what? Can you
Yes.
let me know what?" Because it would be useful to have that targeted rather than a generic wish. So I'm wondering as well about early career confidence to deliver a set play of things that I've learned and that I want to get across. Later career confidence to listen to what is being asked for and provide. So is there
Yeah.
something in that in terms of your confidence to impact in a different way or provide a different customer value?
Yeah, I think it's well said. I think, again, speaking to my experience earlier in my career, I'd like to think I still had a good sense of competence. I certainly had the confidence. As I say, whether that was a full sense of that, I'm not sure. But that competence was quite one dimensional. I had my way of doing it and I would deliver. Whereas now, and not unusually, the more experienced you become, the more models and frameworks, mental models that you have in your mind, the more schemas you have in your mind. You've seen a lot of it before. You've been asked the same questions and given appropriate answers, and sometimes inappropriate answers
Mm-hmm.
that you've learned from. And so now I definitely think that I have a greater capacity to flex away from perhaps what would be my initial framework or model that I might take into an environment, an organization, a club, a team, an individual, flex away and go to plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E, and
Yeah.
or to speak to what you said, ask the relevant question of them and negotiate and co-create answers based on, or solutions based on what they're saying.
Yeah, again through the podcast and what you've offered to the profession, this a question that I've had for a long time is how good is sports psychology at the heal thyself physician and building confidence for the practitioner psychologist. So what is it that you need to be confident in, and therefore what should development of practitioners include so that they are kind of fit to play the game in what is focused on what the consumer needs rather than I've learned a curriculum and this is what I want to share, and the two don't always meet.
Yeah, and I think to speak to that, I think when I was training, and maybe you can speak a bit about when you were training, because it was just a touch bit before me. I suppose central to what we were doing were mental skills,
Mm-hmm.
learning some psychological frameworks like REBT or CBT. ACT wasn't quite as popular as it is now, but or maybe more of a humanistic approach. So you had that, you had mental skills at the core of things, and maybe a bit of knowledge around leadership and teamwork and stuff like that, and away you went. But I think predominantly we did mental skills, or at least that's how I felt. And you went out there and you did your stuff. I think nowadays that landscape is shifting slightly more towards mental health and well-being, which I think is great in so many ways. And yet I think at the moment, I think we're challenged in sports psychology. I don't think we're necessarily meeting what the consumer demands. I think the consumer does want some mental health and some well-being stuff, and I think that's really, really important. And I think we're meeting that quite well. But I also think we have to remember we are sport psychologists. We got into this
Yeah.
because we're passionate about sport, and I'm happy to be checked and challenged here, Chris, honestly. But, I got into sports psychology because I wanted to be on the course, the courts, the pitch, the field. I'm passionate about coaching science, skill acquisition. I'm interested in putting the boots on, being out there, being involved, asking players questions as individuals and even in a group, and being bold enough to actually have a challenging conversation with, say, a head coach or a manager about my
Mhm.
capacity to do that, which might feel like it's treading on their territory. I'm answering you like this because I just think we need to be braver and bolder as practitioners. I think I think sports psychology literature and sports psychologists and their experiences, we've got 40, 50 years of great stuff in our locker that we can bring out, and we can help coaches on a real broad selection of areas, as I say, like skill acquisition and coaching and learning and teaching and so on and so forth, that we're not doing. And I just wonder if we're pigeonholing ourselves a little bit towards the mental health and well-being piece, which again is important, but
Yeah.
we can offer a great deal out there. And I know this is a bugbear of yours, even though you're not in the industry anymore. It's we're not selling that. We're not helping clubs, teams, organizations understand the real breadth and depth of sports psychology.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to, I think, one again, the confidence piece. To, can you confidently articulate your particular value offer, given the type of practitioner that I am, given what I do, and this is how I can come in and make an impact, and these are the areas that I'm able to be expert in, but also help facilitate other practitioners to become part of a holistic picture as well. And I think it is that confidence to kind of go, this is my version of it, because there isn't a central version that all practitioners have to sign up to.
Was that confidence? The landscape was very different, let's say, back in the 90s when you were starting. But do you feel
Mhm.
that there was a greater sense, even though there you could argue, or I think it would be true to say there's a great deal more acceptance of our industry now, sports
Yeah,
psychology.
yeah.
Would you say there was greater confidence back in the 90s with practitioners? Would you say they were braver?
Um, I'm not sure there was greater confidence. I don't know to what extent there's a real sense of unity
Okay.
within.
But with unity, there can come
Yeah,
confidence
yeah.
because you feel you're in it together.
So I hugely benefited from the fact that there was the British Olympic Association, as it was then. Team GB had the psychology advisory group, so there were a group of practitioners who all worked together. Who, there was a lot of great development going on, and I'm sure, within the EIS and other services, there are practitioner groups that are working together. But it felt like there was opportunity to professionally develop together, to go out to serve the sports from a strong base. I'm not sure outside the UK sport and the institutes whether there is such a sense of unity from the
Yeah.
profession, whereby which, you know, we've got a central place where we all get together and we help each other be the best practitioners we can be individually and collectively, and then we go out and serve the particular contracts and customers that we have. And I think that's where, with an increased number of people, I wonder whether it's become a little bit more diffuse in terms of where everyone may get their own sources of confidence from. And I'm sure there are supervision groups and practitioner groups and various things that people do, but it doesn't feel like it's fully united. And I felt like I was part of something that was going out trying to make a significant impact in the same way that other people were in other sports. Uh, and that helped a lot, because I knew there were people I could talk to and ask stuff about, and that I'd bump into at various places as well, and it would be likely to have some helpful conversations just about what we're doing and what we're thinking and what we're seeing.
Yeah, and I also want to be respectful here. I mean, let's say I don't work with those practitioners who are involved with the English Institute of Sport, and that's the largest collection of sports psychs at the moment in the UK, and that was ably led some years ago by Dr. Pete Lindsay and then by Dr. Kate Hayes. I'm not too sure of the landscape right now, but they did wonderful jobs, and there's some brilliant people there, and there probably is a greater sense of collective confidence there. I think for me, and maybe this makes me a little bit more isolated from that situation, I function heavily, let's say, in the world of football, and I've always wondered, and I've thrown this message out in the past. So maybe again, I'm happy to be checked and challenged, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I think we should have enough credibility, our professionals, sports psychology, sports psychologists in the UK, HCPC, right? Health and Care Professions Council, registered sports psychologists. I don't understand why a manager or head coach from the world of football, the world's biggest sport, the Premier League, the biggest league of the world's biggest sport, that there's not a head coach or manager saying, I have got to have a sports psychologist on my coaching staff. Like, this is so necessary, because what I know about sports psychology and what I know about sports psychologists is they bring this wonderful array of tools and frameworks and approaches that will be ideal for our coaching meetings, that will ensure that there's no echo chamber.
Yeah.
This is going to be somebody who can check and challenge us, who has a good knowledge base, again, of coaching science and skill acquisition, alongside the well-being, mental health, the psychological frameworks, the mental skills, the leadership, the teamwork, positive psycho, all those kind of. I need this person on my coaching staff, because this person is really going to make sure that we are evidence-based in what we're doing, is going to keep us in the right direction, is going to check and challenge us when we need it, is going to be on the training ground with us, making sure we are underpinned biopsychosocially or psychosocially, can help me to lead cross-departmentally, can make sure systemically we've got the right macro structures, the right mesosystems in place. Wow, I really need this sports psych on stuff, and it doesn't exist, Chris.
Have you had a sense from any of your guests though that any individuals are working in that type of way, or that have you seen that from sites in different countries? Because I know there's definitely different approaches in different countries, and perhaps there's different sort of attitudes towards the profession and the need for it. I just wonder whether there's any of the guests have given you a sense of where we would build from, or what can be built from.
I think there might be individual examples dotted around the world, depending on individual attitude. So, for instance, I think somebody said to me that, and again, somebody said this is third hand or something, so it could be completely wrong, but perhaps Julian Nagelsmann, the German head coach, had a sports psych on the bench in the recent Euros.
Right.
So may have been a member of their coaching staff.
Yeah.
I think collectively, it's not that we failed, it's just collectively we haven't convinced. Collectively, we haven't influenced enough, because I really, really believe, look at it this way, Chris, there's enough heads of performances who have sports science backgrounds, human performance backgrounds, where it's more holistic, who have a seat at the table at some of the world's biggest, let's say, football clubs, but world's biggest sports teams. But a sports psych doesn't. I can't name anyone. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm not encyclopedic with that. But I don't think it does. It certainly doesn't in the Premier League. And I don't understand that. And I'm not blaming anybody, other than we need to do better then. We need to convince.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I think that just comes back to collectively. Wouldn't it be great if everyone kind of knew and could, some of the recent stuff I've seen post Olympics from the UK sports, there's some fantastic stuff going on about decompression. So there's definitely collective stuff taking place, but wouldn't it be really interesting from a professional confidence perspective to kind of have an insight into all everything that was delivering in the types of way that you're talking about, in that systemic approach, as well as just brilliance on the ground in a very specific way from a skill acquisition or a performance preparation perspective as well. But it's a big sell. It's a really big sell you're talking about.
And I think it would be remiss of me again to, as you're speaking, I'm kind of thinking of all the great sports psychs I know who would be saying, yeah, but Dan, ethics, and but Dan, not everybody would want to attain that role. And again, I absolutely understand all of the pushbacks, the checks and challenge. I appreciate that. I would still claim that, and also contextually, you wouldn't necessarily say every sport would offer this same kind of role. But if I look at a sport that I work in heavily, and I'm quite well versed now in what happens in, say, the world of football or the world of rugby, for example, maybe you could argue any team sport. Again, I'm going to make this big bold claim. I think one day a head coach or manager is going to come along and go, I have to have a sports psych as my number two or number three. I mean, historically, you could say Carlo Ancelotti, when he was at Chelsea, brought in Dr. Bruno De Michele, who I think was more a sports scientist than a sports psych, but would claim to be a sports psych,
Yeah,
and he was his assistant manager at Chelsea. Bill Beswick was assistant manager to Steve McLaren at Middlesbrough two
yeah,
decades ago. So it has happened.
yeah. Willie Rilo worked an awful lot with Sven Göran Eriksson.
Willie Raylo works a lot with. We're speaking today, and very sadly, it was Sven's funeral
Yeah,
today. So yeah,
yeah,
he did some great work there. But in the context of these sports, that's what I think that we in psychology. You talk about. Let's come back to the confidence. We need to be more.
yeah,
We have to be respectful, but we have to be respectful of the culture we're stepping into, the language, the specific challenges of the sport. But we have a great knowledge base. We are experts in human functioning, human learning, human development, human behavior. Why would you not? Why would you not want
yeah,
somebody with this expertise by your side constantly? Why would you not want that? Because ultimately, by and large, Chris, I very rarely have a conversation with a leading football coach or rugby coach or coach of a team sport who doesn't say to me, Dan, the human factors are the most important factors here. Like, tactics is
yeah,
really
yeah.
important, but
And that's really interesting. That's really interesting now, because human factors is a really great angle of looking at it. So I've been on a for the Institute of Pre-Hospital Emergency Medicine Care. They kind of run a degree and a master's program, and I've contributed a couple of times to some of that for the folks who ultimately might end up flying on the helicopter emergency medical service and doing other such things. That they work massively around the human factors, and they call human factors, and it's all about. But it's labelled in that way as human factors. It's not performance psychology. So it's really interesting how the labelling, the
could
marketing,
be.
life and death situation, there's a deep appreciation of the importance of, being able to self-regulate, combine effectively with other people, make sure that decision making under pressure is a practice. There's all of this stuff that, as well as their clinical brilliance of to be able to do a sort of a thoracotomy in the middle of Oxford Street, as well as being able to do that, but also be incredibly gifted humans to manage the different factors that are influencing the potential of kind of, carrying out this procedure. That, perhaps, they've always talked about, the Bill Shankly thing about, the life and death. It's more important than that. Well, actually,
I was literally about to quote that.
maybe it's a misquote, actually. So I
Okay.
was looking it up a little while ago. But it's that kind of principle. Maybe if it is this important, what's the cost of not having this stuff in your pocket? And I've seen that a lot from the corporate world. Very often, the cost of inaction is a far greater selling point than trying to list features and benefits. And being able to articulate through that sense of, where if these things aren't in place, what are you consistently going to keep experiencing that might make things harder? So
Mm,
at least let's protect against not having this present. But and when once we've got that, what can we build in terms of maximizing efficacy, impact, etc., etc. As you were talking and describing the breadth of practitioner potential, it was making me think about 299 episodes and the fact that you've been able to do so many. Is that also a source of the problem as well as a source of the solution, to be able to create clarity for the consumer when there are so many different things that potentially a psychologist can be supporting with or commenting on or having expertise in?
yeah. I really, I think you are 100% correct. I really believe that, and I think, well, this could open up another conversation about, you know, what does a sports psychologist do, and how does a sports psych define what they do? And I think that has to be a negotiation. I think it is a big problem, Chris, because I think that, and as somebody who is really passionate about the mental side of competing. If you were to ask me really, what do you do? The number one thing I would say is, going into a sports team, I would say, I really feel, I really am confident about, again,
Yeah, yeah,
confident about helping you develop great
yeah,
competitors. That's my real passion out of
yeah,
everything. However, at the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, I do love learning and deliberate practice and teaching
yeah,
and
yeah,
coaching
yeah,
and all the kind of things we've talked on the Sports Psych Show with great academics like Professor Mark Williams around the skill. And Mark is a skill acquisition expert, but he's also a qualified sports psychologist as
yeah,
well. Which again demonstrates that I think we in sports psychology can afford to say that this is what we do and this is what we offer as well. But I think, look, I think it can be challenging. And admittedly, when I say we have all of these things that we can offer, well, whoa, it's so many things. It's almost too much,
yeah.
and you're actually going to get nothing done.
Given that desire to focus on the competitive stuff. So when I was doing coach development stuff,
Mm.
I would often ask coaches if the medals were being handed out for psychological performance, what would get you on the top step of the podium? So what do we need to make sure is in place so that your athletes get the psychological medals? And and I wonder, from again the podcast and different things, would you have a hierarchy? Would you have a rank order of, if we are looking to kind of prime this competitive mind, what are the things that you're maxing out on that says, right, we want to make sure these things are there because that's going to help get you close to the podium of psychological medal?
I write about this every day, and I'm insanely biased on this one. But I'm a big believer, whether it's individual sports or team sports, and team sports adds in an extra dynamic here. But I'm passionate about competitors having mental frameworks.
Yeah,
Mental frameworks for competition. I just think mental frameworks are imperative, because I've just sat with too many very, very, very good competitors. I mean, like, some being household names, who, when you've asked them, what are you trying to achieve mentally, tumbleweed will float across the ground before you get any kind of response. And so I'm a big believer that athletes, competitors who want to be the very best that they can be, require some kind of structure around their mindset. And you know we both write quite frequently, let's say on LinkedIn, and I write every day about high performance mindset and I use my terms, high performance mindset and
yeah,
low performance mindset. I want the players I'm working with and the teams I'm working with to know precisely what their high performance mindset is. And when I say precisely, that could be very broad
yeah,
for those people who can accommodate a broad notion of high performance mindset. Similarly, that could be stunningly narrow
yeah,
for somebody who doesn't want to think too much about it. That's fine, but we still need to define it,
yeah,
because we need to find a way in our organization, or we need to find a way in the coaching and developmental practice, if it's an individual sports person, to reinforce that framework.
yeah,
So I think that is absolutely imperative. I think that's the number one thing. And I think when you look at the team aspect, if we talk about team sports, more and more, the more experienced I become, the more I believe that teams need a team framework,
yeah, yeah,
which acts as a shared mental model.
yeah,
And again, my I would always start with the suggestion of high performance mindset and low performance mindset. And I had this recently with a 2-year stint at the Dutch football club Feyenoord, where we really, really worked hard to develop a team high performance mindset and an understanding of what a team low performance mindset looks like. And the direction being that we're going to do all we can across the training ground, across the coaching staff, across all of the staff, across the departments, into the team, through the leadership group, into the rest of the players that what do we do when we go play? We start and stay in our high performance mindset. I think that's a very, very powerful place to be. And my experience suggests in team sports that's not done enough, that it's
Yeah.
still an assortment.
Assumed.
Yeah, it's still an assortment of individuals kind of finding their own way with this. Some are interested, some are not interested. Some have psych, some don't. If there's a team psych, some use that person, some don't. The coaching staff themselves are versed in some areas and not in others. And I just think it needs to be organized. Again, respecting individual differences. Again, respecting that team mental framework needs to be fairly robust. But I really believe that is a requirement, in my opinion.
Yeah. And there's a lot of interesting things to kind of unpack there around. Within a team, you don't decide tactically. You're not buying into the tactical model when it comes to the we're all going to do recovery and we're going to do that, but we'll find how you do it personally. But there is a requirement to recover or sort of pre-match preparation. So there's those types of things as well. So there's a couple of things I again just want to push on. Does that feel like there is an opportunity to develop psychological literacy for people? So is there a language? Is there something that is important that you've seen through the podcast where there is actually the use of language, that building confidence in people who aren't psychologists to talk in the language of psychology?
Hugely so, and I don't know if I'm going to be particularly successful here at drawing on a podcast. Although I'm sure there's in the 299 episodes we've done, there's been some wonderful stuff on frameworks and skills and psychosocial development and the importance of language. So people can explore that. But I really would love, because I'm so passionate about this area, I would love to speak from some personal experience here. And again, I'm going to draw from my recent experience with Feyenoord. I love that idea of psychological literacy, because I think immediately, Chris, as soon as let's say you put the terms HPM and LPM, high performance and low performance mindset, into an environment, and again, it's respecting there's going to be other terms.
Yeah.
Example, New Zealand rugby, blue head, red head, right? There's going to be other terms, but HPM, LPM, immediately it now gives us the opportunity to do so many different things, whether it's working with individuals to help them understand their own unique HPM and understand their own unique scenarios when they drop down to LPM. And the very process of having those conversations raises their literacy, even the ones, and again, it's respecting that some don't want to do too much of a deep dive, that's fine. But even if we just have a 10-minute conversation and reflect on them at their best, then we can elicit from them a bit of a blueprint for an HPM and a bit of a blueprint for when it goes wrong and they drop down to their LPM. If that's enough, that's fine. But we've immediately raised the literacy or the psych literacy or the psych IQ, if you want to use that term. But similarly, and something we did at Feyenoord was to have small group conversations. Now, small groups could be in pairs, but they could be in pods of 4, or they could be across the midfield or the defence or the attack or something like that, which is what we did. And you know what? Again, not everybody is going to be heavily involved in the conversation, but the fact they're sitting there, the fact they're absorbing something, the fact that you've got people in the room who are talking, and we were revolving everything around HPM and LPM, but we're starting to have a conversation in the team about what this means a focus of attention. This means staying connected to the game. Well, what does that mean for you, Joe, over there? And what does that mean for you, Pete, over there? So you're drawing out information from the players that's stuck in their mind and relating it to a psych framework, thus for me increasing their psych literacy.
And from a confidence perspective here, I think there's potentially an opportunity for some group therapy with other practitioners and coaches, because I know not every athlete loves every training session that they have to do technically or physically. I know from a strength and conditioning perspective, I'm pretty sure that not all the athletes love all the different things that they're asked to do by the S&C coach, and I know some people hate core stability and other people, we shouldn't think psychology is any different. That there are different degrees of engagement with different bits of what we offer. It's about providing people with the opportunity to kind of go, these things are an essential part of the training platform, some of which will resonate more than others, but we're all doing all of them.
100% agree. And I would say, and maybe this comes back to the confidence of the practitioner, the experience, the skilled intentionality of the practitioner, the competence and the confidence. But you do have to be confident enough to stand in a room facilitating a conversation with, let's say, 6 or 7 players there about HPM and understand and be able to deal with the overt checks and challenges, and even the implicit checks and challenges by somebody looking a little bit bored or whatever, and just try to find
Yeah.
ways to draw them in, or finding many opportunities to help them understand the importance of it, and that no, they might not love it, and they might never love it, but similarly, you're a team, you're an individual and a team player, you're a teammate in a team, and subsequently you've got to contribute. The other thing, because I'd love to get your opinion on this, is that the more experienced I've become, the more I've and bear with me with what I'm going to say here, and you mentioned it earlier, it's not just increasing psychological literacy, it's also increasing the ability for those around you to deliver the psychological side within their role.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and, and, and so almost a solution to what you were saying there is to make sure the heads of performances, the sports scientists, the strength and conditioning coaches can speak this shared language. Hence, vital to have these mental frameworks in place for this shared language, shared set of behaviors, HPM,
Yeah.
LPM, as an example, just an example. And if you've got your strength and conditioning coaches, you've got your, your sports scientists, and we're obviously talking about the pinnacle of the sports here, where there's the resources in place and the infrastructure, but you've got the medical department, you've got the physios. Everybody's got a language. No, they might not be able to go into the same depth as you can as a psych, but they can better deliver psych in their role every day. Now, I'd even go further. Obviously, the coaching staff is going to do it as well. That stands to reason.
Yeah.
But something I've said recently, which I felt we started to do quite well at, say, Feyenoord as an example, is I want the players to be psychologists in their own right.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
again, because I got shouted at recently on X about, because I said something like the players are the psychologists. Shout at me, shout at me, shout at me. No, they're not psychologists. And I know they're not psychologists. They're not psychologists. But let's go with this idea, because they're on the pitch in the heat of action. They're in training every day. They're on the grass all the time or on the court. If we can help them influence others, in essence, that's leadership, but it's leading the mental side. And I just think that is absolute necessity.
Yeah, yeah, and if we go back to confidence for the practitioner and taking a lot of the knowledge that's gained through what you've made available to everyone, it's having the confidence perhaps that you don't need to be the font of that knowledge, but you need to be able to help set that knowledge free
Yeah.
within a culture, within an environment. And I think, sometimes it takes a lot of confidence to not be delivering something,
Yeah.
but influencing the understanding of and the customization of a concept that is psychological in its origin.
Hugely so. For me, I'm a facilitator more than anything else. And maybe a decade ago, I wouldn't have thought I would be saying that. But I definitely feel. I mean, just throwing something back at you. You spent many years with British rowing, and again, it's a neat combination between an individual and a team sport, obviously. But
Yeah,
did
yeah.
you feel that over time it became more facilitation as things started to become embedded within that culture? I understand things change on every cycle, but did it feel that way, or not so much in that culture?
It's an interesting one because the 4-year cycle of an Olympic program means that there's
Yeah,
always the kind of the refresh, the reset, the go again, and with different people, new
of
people,
course.
some same, and actually the continuity bit is important. What was clear to me that I learned was that in all of the other areas there was a desire for continuity and consistency. So the technical model was increasingly refined and shared, and coaches would still coach it in the way that they wanted, but it was a shared starting point. The the training program was set up. There was a language around it. There was a way in which that the program was almost a thing of its own. It was an identity. It was a do the program. The program is a thing. The program must be followed. There's a real reverence around it. So I was increasingly aware that if you've got to aspire to try and create some type of language, some type of familiarity, some type of ownership and co-ownership of stuff as well. If we go back to what we were talking about earlier with literacy. I used to very glibly talk about psychology is just thinking about what you want to think about and then practicing thinking it. And,
Yeah.
which was a helpful starting point, but then kind of going, okay, but some of the things that you want to think about are probably these things, and if we have a language around some of these things that you want to think about, both in training and in competition, it'll be helpful if you can do that. And then here's some of the things that you can do to practice thinking it and embedding that in. So I think it's having the commitment to having a platform that people can build from and know what they're engaging with. And typically when there were new athletes coming into the program where I got the chance to speak to them, my initial questions were, hey, what have you done before? What's worked for you? Where have you come across it? What's been powerful for you?
Yeah.
Because it's useful to know that, because here's some of the stuff we are going to typically talk about. How does that compare with what you've previously seen in the under 23s or in, wherever you've come from? So there was a desire to kind of, one, build confidence that prior experience was of value, but two, help translate into some of the stuff that we knew at that level was going to be the kind of topic of conversation. Relatively limited involvement, but that was the type of stuff that I was always looking to do when we were in the different phases of each season and the cycle as well. So, but moving from year one of the cycle, we were going to talk about more foundational stuff, moving through into year three, where it's Olympic qualification, where it starts to get a bit more sort of edge and performance focus, and year four Olympic specific stuff around what we know about the psychology of the Olympics and how you can enjoy that challenge as much as possible.
I'm going to draw on something. Well, what I'm going to draw on is the fact that you're using this term confidence a lot. And what I'm going to draw on as well is, let's go back to what I said at the beginning, which is there's some interesting attitudes now in sports psychology around this term of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
That perhaps there's some people who think, well, you can't. It's not that tangible. We're not so sure about confidence. We're not so worried about it. And I'm just going to draw on that disparity between you making a real, I'm not saying it's the central thing, because
Yeah.
you might disagree with me, but it's a big thing. And I would align myself with you so much on that. Others would say, we're not sure about this idea of confidence. I'm sitting here talking about HPM and LPM. Others would go, oh, I don't like that term. I wouldn't use those terms. Where I'm going here, Chris, because I know we've had this conversation before, but it would be good to have it in this episode, is, do you think that that's a weakness of sports psychology? Maybe it's a strength as well, in as much as there's so many different topics, as we said earlier, and there's so many different terms. Great, we can grab hold of whatever we want. We could create a term ourselves, but equally, for the consumer, for the clubs, the organizations who want to employ us, they're like, yeah, but this is so slippery. This is just, we're so confused, what's right, what's wrong.
Yeah, having done the corporate work so much over the last 25 years as well, and in the last 5 or 6 years become really confident about how to drive a sales process and a sales conversation that is designed to deliver an impact. I wish I had learned sales skills very early on. But not selling something to someone that they don't want, but actually creating the value proposition with the person who is going to invest in what is being created in such a way that they're helping define the value that ultimately they're going to make an investment in. But the way in which we can work through that really allows us a fantastic opportunity to kind of go, we're going to come up with a solution or two here. And whether you go with me or not, that's fine. I know I've helped you get absolute clarity over what it is you're looking to invest in and buy and the value that you're looking to unlock. And so it's the confidence to create a shared picture
like that,
and the confidence to create what is required from all parties in order to maximize the chances of that value being realized. Otherwise, it's me trying to do something to you and you kind of deciding whether you like it or not. So there's something, there's the psychology of marketing, the psychology of selling, the psychology of buying. There's so much of that which is really important. And I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about the different characters in the room and a lot of the personality stuff that you've had. The ability to stand in a room and see someone react when you're selling something or delivering a session and kind of go, they are demonstrating the characteristics of A, B, C, which if I'm not judgmental about whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, I get an insight into the type of person that they are. So if someone's not sort of waxing lyrical and jumping up and down saying this is amazing, that gives me some insight into their kind of filtering and skepticism and their ability to be, agreeableness. Yeah. So it's they're just being the person in an interaction. And that gives me a way of kind of going, actually, I possibly need to do a bit more of this sharing to help that person understand how it's relevant for them. And so there's so much of that which is about selling the concept, but then selling in the delivery of what you do as well to different types of people who are consuming through who they are as a person.
So Jordan Belfort was the Wolf of Wall Street. You're basically saying,
yep,
it's selling skills above knowing mental skills.
But most of the stuff is helping people buy. It's not selling.
Yeah.
It's creating a real clarity over the reasons for wanting to buy, the potential solutions that can then be invested in, but then what it means to use that investment. And all of us in our everyday consumer lives, we buy stuff not with an expectation that once we've bought it, it does the service for us. We still have to use it and we interact with it. We don't buy much stuff and just assume that it's going to work for us and it will know exactly what we want from it.
With that in mind, when you reflect back on all the great coaches you've worked with, I'm going to slightly take what you've said and flip it to a related topic, because I'm conscious that we've got lots of sports psychs listening in. Great, we could go down a path of, well, how do you sell yourself as a sports psych? We've got many, many coaches listening in, and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, you're describing the best coaches.
And I have said for years and years, I loved working with the coaches that I worked with because the biggest thing I saw in them was the huge belief in their program.
Yeah.
And they articulated that through every single day. It's just like, the belief in their philosophy. Come with me because my philosophy is going to get us to where we want to get to. And I could see coaches with subtly different philosophies within the same program having equal impact, because the athletes are kind of going, I'm hearing enough of this that I'm with you. I want to bring some of me to it. I'm not handing myself fully over, and the fact that we can have a kind of a healthy interaction about it is going to be really helpful. But a coach is going to work every day to sell the belief that what we're doing is going to make the impact to achieve what we all ultimately want to achieve. It's a huge thing, and it's why I could never be a coach, because doing that every day to be the person who is creating that culture of belief that what we do will get us to where we want to through action and reflection. That's brilliant, and that's why I respect coaches so much, because they have to be at the center of pulling all of this stuff together and not just being psychologists. They've got to do the multidisciplinary jigsaw.
Do you think influence, persuasion, again, psychological constructs, right? Psychological concepts, influence, persuasion, these lie at the heart of coaching?
I think that starts with the coaches influencing and persuading themselves in order to then, when they open their mouths, to sell it to other people to be able to be as compelling. So but that's why I think this is all about, creating cultures that are based upon a shared belief that has to start somewhere.
Is that a double-edged sword though? Because you can lose your job as a coach because you become so bullish about what you're going to do and you lack that flexibility.
I don't, but most of the business work that I've done, for ages now, is actually helping people define the difference between success through the lens of the scoreboard and success through the lens of how we've played. And if you don't keep the balance and the humility of the relationship between the two right, then that's where some of that goes wrong. I get the hubris of believing the scoreboard, so I'm not paying as much due diligence to the kind of the belief in upgrading my philosophy and making it work for now, rather than just using past successes. And if I focus just too much on the philosophy without paying attention to the scoreboard, I'm missing part of the equation, because this is about, the winning, the competitive game, rather than just the playing beautifully without getting the results type game as well. So I think it's that making sure the balance between the two keeps you honest, and sometimes knowing when do I need to reverse engineer from a result that I need, and when do I need to build from not having a track record of result to create a belief that we're going to have the story that we want when it comes to looking at the trophies and the successes and the wins that we're after.
How does somebody marry that with such an outcome-oriented business?
But that's the joy of sport, isn't it? Where you spend more time training than you do competing, and you are ultimately competing on the effectiveness of your preparation and training and development. But that's where you are constantly playing the cause and effect relationship between, we understand what we said we were going to do, we understand how well we did it, and we now look at what result that gave us, and we see how that sets us up to have a shared mental model that we can then build on, refine, adapt, use flexibly. But that's the conditions. If you're not sort of into kind of having a very outcome obsessed world, don't go into competitive sport.
Yeah. I'd love to give you my two favourite quotes.
Go on then. That'll be a good place to finish, I reckon.
Yeah, because it's very relevant to what we're saying. So one is from Johan Cruyff, who said, in order to be a coach of Barcelona, it's more important knowing how to lead a group of players than knowing how to correct a mistake made on the field. You have to have influence over the group to be able to seduce, convince, and understand them. So I think the interesting thing there is you could argue that is from one of the greatest technicians of all time, talking about, well, actually, it's the ability to influence, seduce players. And
that was him becoming a great leader rather than teaching people to be technically as gifted as he was.
And one more, a close relation here, Pep Guardiola, arguably the greatest tactician of all time. Pep said, what I've learned over the years, I'm aware tactics are very important, but the really, really great coaches are coaches of people.
Yeah. And I love the tactics of having a choice of thoughts that you can draw upon, and being tactically astute to think the thing that is most helpful to draw on at any point in time as well. So I think they're great couple of quotes.
The mental tactician.
Yeah. And if we're all our own mental tacticians through the education that we've received and the support we've been given, then actually we're confident to be ourselves.
That's the title of our next book, The Mental Tactician. There you go. Chapter 1.
It'll be first book rather than next book, but if it was short, that would be good. But yeah, no.
All right, Chris, I'm very grateful. I don't know if we really stuck to the original format of you quizzing me about the 299 episodes, which I'm quite relieved about because my memory isn't what it used to be. So, but before you go, the one thing I would say is I'm so grateful to everybody coming onto the show and sharing their wisdom. And there's just some just incredible episodes in there. With some incredible people, and for me, I just think there's such rich stuff that Sports Psych has to offer. So yeah, I'm just really, really grateful for everybody coming onto the show and sharing. And I've learned so much, and I've learned today, Chris, as well. So thank you so much. This was your This is your third time?
Yeah,
It was, wasn't
yeah.
it? So thank you. And how can people find you, follow you, and get in touch?
Probably easiest way, planetk2.com websites. There's all sorts of stuff on there as well. And I'm probably on LinkedIn more than anywhere else as well. So just find me on there as well. And brilliant job of creating your own fantastic continued professional development program. Uh,
Yes,
but also making that such a valuable resource for a whole bunch of people who are out there trying to do great work in the world of sport in so many different ways as well. So, a huge thank you from the audience to you as well. So, here's to the next 300.
indeed. Lots of fun. Thanks, Chris.
Pleasure. Thank you as well. Always a pleasure.
Well, everyone, I really enjoyed that episode, and I'd love to hear what you, the listener, think. So please do get in touch via X or Facebook or through my website, danabrahams.com, to tell me what you think of the show. And if you do have any suggestions, I'd be delighted to hear them. I'm already looking forward to next week's episode. Bye for now.